the metanarrative, which is up there, and we're going to start describing first what is it, okay? We have to have the context of what is the metanarrative. And so that's actually how we start tonight. First, I'm going to give you a definition of a metanarrative. And after that, I'm going to talk about examples. Then I'm going to ask the question, so after you've seen examples, is there one? At least you'll get a chance to decide if you think there is a metanarrative after I give you some examples about what one is. And then the question that matters the most is, why is that important? Why would that be important? So we're going to look at what is it. So what is a metanarrative? Here's a definition, and we start with the word narrative, even though it has Greek, the meta at the top. Let's talk. What is a narrative? It's a story, right? A story in the telling of a story. So the word meta before narrative is from the Greek, and it means the comprehensive idea. The thing that is behind or even beyond it. So a metanarrative is this. It's a more comprehensive idea behind the story. Something more comprehensive. And now, here's a long explanation, but I begin with this. A metanarrative is a comprehensive story to all. So it would mean that it would have to matter to all people. So if there's a comprehensive story, it would have to matter to everyone. And it would actually have to be common to every person. So if there's a metanarrative, that's where we're starting. I'm not saying that there is yet. It would have to be common to all. Now, it's also a story or a narrative about all the narratives in history. And see, it offers a legitimate explanation of history and what's happened, except that something has not yet transpired. You see, there is this idea that as yet unrealized idea. There is something that is unrealized as yet. There must be an unrealized piece of the metanarrative that has not been revealed. So the master idea, we see only a part of it. Ask yourself if this is true for your own life. Where is your life trajectory going? There's some part of it that you don't know, right? I'm talking about tonight even. Some portion of it is as yet unrealized. But there's actually something even bigger yet that's unrealized. And again, this is true for every person. As we walk through life, you'll see that some portions of it are yet to be realized. So a metanarrative is this comprehensive story about all history, and yet some portion of it is unrealized. There should be examples, right? If the idea that there's a comprehensive story is true, well, there should be examples of this, right? Not only can you start to feel it about your own life, but I should be able to raise examples, and you'll say, wow, that's interesting. I never thought about it like that before. There's something behind even common stories that people in this room have heard and really know pretty well. And I'm going to paint some of those pictures for you. Everybody in this room knows the story of the Wizard of Oz. Almost every person in America knows the story of the Wizard of Oz. And on the surface, it's like a young girl who's not very satisfied with her place in life, and she sings a famous song, Somewhere Over the Rainbow. That's where she wants to go, right? She's in boring old Kansas, and she wants out of there, and she's pretty unhappy because if you play Trivial Pursuit, Elmira Gulch, that's the name of the woman who wants to take Toto away. And so Elmira Gulch wants to take the dog away. She feels like her parents don't understand her. How many people have gone through that? She wants to go over the rainbow to find a better circumstance. But men and women, that's not the meta-narrative of the story. See what I'm doing here? I'm showing you that I just told you what the basic story is, the basic narrative. Men and women, there is a meta-narrative behind The Wizard of Oz. And the meta-narrative is that she, or everyone, needs to learn to be content where Providence has placed them and enjoy the blessings of home. What is the last thing Dorothy says in the movie? There's no place like home. Because you see, that's the meta-narrative of the story. The meta-narrative is we need to be content with the place where Providence has placed us. Citizen Kane. Citizen Kane is a movie made, and Orson Welles is the star. And he is one of the richest men in the United States. And it looks like the story is about how Kane tries to find fulfillment and happiness, but he searches for it in the attainment of power, wealth, and influence. Does Kane become a very wealthy person in the story? Yes, he becomes massively wealthy. He builds a giant house called Xanadu. You know what this is fashioned after? San Simeon. The story of Citizen Kane is the story of a real person that lives in our world. And so they called it Xanadu in the movie. It was a reflection of a real person, William Randolph Hearst. And he searched for power and attainment, wealth, and he achieves a lot of it. But you know, the meta-narrative is real peace and desires that he wants is linked to a word called rosebud. And that was his boyhood sled. You don't find that out until the very end. At the very beginning of the story, the reporter, the journalist, is told by his editor, go find out why Charles Foster Kane said rosebud as his last word. But we discover in the meta-narrative that the place of safety and satisfaction and deep contentment is really where he lived when he was a little boy. Men and women, isn't that somewhat true for yourself? I want you to look deeply into your own life and say, you know, there was a place of safety and simple pleasures and love and joy where life was different, where you were not pursuing wealth, power, or influence, or even any other type of attainment. It was something completely different. And so that's the meta-narrative there. And that movie is so powerful because a lot of us relate to it. We relate to that when I was a child, I thought as a child, and I felt as a child, and I felt safe. So really, what I've just tried to do is say this to you. Is this proof? It's not proof. These are simply examples that there's something bigger, something behind every story. When I've talked to people, I've just got them to see that. All I've tried to do is get them to see that they watch some movie, read some book. You can engage every person on the topic of the meta-narrative by saying, what's really behind this story? Something more important is actually behind this story. And that's what I'm trying to just demonstrate to you right now. So, is there something, is there a meta-narrative is the question? So now we've said those are singularities. What would proof really look like? If I could now describe what I thought looked like proof, here's what I would say to you. I would say, what if there was a meta-narrative about all stories? So I would claim that I would work on this theory. The theory is all stories, if you added them all up and you said, what's the meta-narrative of all stories? And you asked that question, and if we could show that there was one, it would be closer to proof that there is a meta-narrative for all things. If there was one idea, just a single idea behind every story. Is everybody with me there? It would be a convincing way to start. Whether it's true or fictional, there's a good chance that I can tell you what many people believe the meta-narrative of all stories actually is. And it's not very pleasant. And here's how it begins. It's in Shakespeare, and it's said by Macbeth. And here's how it begins. Out, out, brief candle. Life's but a walking shadow. a poor player that struts and frets this hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. There's a possibility, men and women, that if there is no meaning, purpose, or value, this is the meta-narrative of every story. Because the stories don't matter. Can you see that? Because life is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. There's at least an alternative. And here is an alternative idea. Outside forces and our choices are shaping and preparing us for what is next. I guess I want you to grasp that. I would say that you look at the Wizard of Oz, outside forces and her choices prepare and make her, shape her for what comes next. And I don't mean eternally, I just mean in the story. When she gets back to Kansas, the things that she went through have shaped her experience and who she is. What does she say at the end again? There's no place like home. You think she's happy to be home? The answer is yes. You see, every story could either be the Macbeth, life is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing, or it's outside forces and our choices are shaping and preparing us for what comes next. It's one of those two. I've had people say to me, now Don, that's incredibly unfair. I'll paint a third picture for you. And here it is. And it is, our meaning, value, and purpose is to improve the quality of all life, to further it into the future for the betterment of all living creatures, life forms, etc. They say, that is why I'm living. I am living. My meaning, value, and purpose is that I am driving the improved quality of life for the betterment of all into the future. That sounds really good, doesn't it? Do you know why it's false? It's false for this reason. The problem with a meta-narrative that you're trying to do all these great things is, in 100 billion years, the universe will wind down to nothing and be a dark, cold cinder, and all of mankind's accomplishments will come to what? To nothing. They will come to nothing. If they write the greatest encyclopedia of all time, the intergalactic encyclopedia that contains all knowledge, what happens after 100 billion years to that encyclopedia? Who reads it? No one. So you see, the trouble with theirs is that theirs is still life told by an idiot. Even though it's 100 billion years in the future, it's still life is told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Nothing. Listen, I'll tell you which one I want to grasp with all of my might, with all of my passion. It is outside forces and our choices are shaping and preparing me for what? For what comes next. That's what I believe all stories are about. And I believe that's what all life is about. There is another life to come, or there is nothing. See, I can take it all the way to outside forces and our choices are shaping and preparing us for what comes next. And then I say what comes next is, men and women, another life. What's happening to us now is not about this life, is it? I don't think it is. I think it's about we are being shaped and prepared for what comes next. And that's why you should ask that question. Well, what comes next? That's why the meta-narrative is important. Now, the best proof of all is this: the elements of a story, the premise of what our lives are all about. And in this context, there's conflict. And the conflict is what your life story is. This is an idea that comes directly from screenwriting, is that every story, every film has a premise, and that premise has a conflict in it, and that conflict gets locked. There is a meta-narrative of your life. There is conflict. The conflict is locked. We're going to talk about when that's locked in the weeks ahead. And there's going to be a climax. There's going to be a choice. You're going to be in high noon, and you're going to have to decide whether you're staying to fight against the bad guys or you're going to leave. You're going to have to decide which side you're on, this side or that side. The conflict will be resolved one way or another. In The Wizard of Oz, when is the conflict locked in The Wizard of Oz? Everyone knows the story. One possibility is it's when the house falls on the witch. You remember that? So listen, she's landed in Munchkin Land, and everything is great. Is this what she wished for? Yes, listen, listen, I think Dorothy is perfectly happy when she lands in Munchkin Land. They're all singing and dancing. But the conflict gets locked when the house falls on the witch? Maybe. I think it gets locked further, don't you, when the ruby slippers are moved from the dead witch to her? Can you see that? Can you see how, listen, a couple of events, I've done a couple of things. One, listen, it got locked a little when when the house fell on the bad witch. It got locked a little more, right? When the ruby slippers moved from the dead witch onto Dorothy's feet. But it also got locked when she decides to go to the Emerald City to see the Wizard of Oz. But men and women, you know what we've not done very well? We haven't really seen when it was actually locked. You know when this conflict was locked? What did Dorothy want? She wanted to leave Kansas. Is that right? The conflict is locked when the tornado comes and rips the house up and sends her into Oz. Because now what does she want to do? Get back. Can you see that? Men and women, are you perceptive to see right now tonight that that's actually how we are? We were someplace and our house was ripped up and taken out, and we want to get back. We want to somehow get back to that place of safety. And that's going to be difficult. And quite frankly, are we going to be able to just make the house float up by itself and fly back to Kansas? The answer is no. It's locked like this. What's behind our lives? What is the comprehensive meaning? When was our conflict locked? What is that conflict? Is there yet unrealized resolution? Is there some unrealized resolution to our own lives? Is there something that is happening that we're still yet to see what that is? The answer is yes. The most significant proof of all is that all of us are convinced our lives should have meaning, value, and purpose. Even those that believe that ultimately ends in nothingness, they live like life has meaning, value, and purpose. Everybody does. Everyone lives like life has meaning, value, and purpose. And so there must be something else. Outside forces and our choices are preparing and shaping us for what comes next. And if there's a meta-narrative for your life story, what is the climactic event? You see, there is a climactic event to your life, just like there is a climactic event to every story, because you must unlock the conflict. The conflict gets locked, you must unlock it. There must be a resolution. There must be something that takes place that makes it possible. If there's a meta-narrative of our lives together in one story, if there's a meta-narrative for mankind, there's some even larger story. It doesn't just accompany us, it must accompany all things. And so let me leave you with this. The meta-narrative can be known. If you are listening to me tonight and you're here, listen, I think you'll realize that I'm going to pull that you can know the meta-narrative straight from the Bible. And here's why I believe the meta-narrative of all things can be known. And there are a couple of important verses. And here's the first one. It's in Ephesians 1, 9 to 10. And it says, making known. I want you to make sure you see that. It says, making known the mystery of His will. This means what God has planned according to His own purpose. There must be some plan and purpose. There must be, listen, there must be a meta-narrative And the Bible says it could be known, the mystery of his will and his purpose. It says he sets it forth in Christ Jesus, and then he says what? A plan. There's a plan. And it says for the fullness of time to come, and it says to unite all things. That's why I said tonight, there's a meta-narrative of all things. There's not just a meta-narrative of your life. There's a meta-narrative of all things. And it says things in heaven and on earth. So it means it's not just about you. It's not just about me. It's about the heavens and the earth. It's about all of it. Here's another verse. In 2 Corinthians 2, 9 and 10, it says, it is written, no eye has seen, no ear has heard, no human mind has conceived the things that God has prepared for those who love him, things that God has revealed to us by his Spirit. And then it says this. It says, the Spirit searches these things, even the deep things of God. It means that you can know what the meta-narrative of the Bible is. You can know what the meta-narrative of all things is because the Spirit can tell you what it is. There's one more really good one here. It's a brief insight. Jesus gives a hint to what the meta-narrative of all things is. And here's where he does it. He does it in John 12, 30 to 32. And it comes right at a point where the heavens speak and somebody hears it. And Jesus says, listen, the voice came for your sake, not for mine. They heard a voice. And he said, listen, that didn't come from me. It came for you so that you would know that God has a master plan, a master idea, and he's just letting you know that the now is the judgment of this world. Now will the ruler of this world be cast out. And I, when I am lifted up, I will draw all people to myself. Men and women, that's because the meta-narrative can be known. It is coming straight from this verse. And it comes also because of what he says here. The last line, if there was a book about Christ's victory, it would say this. It would say he disarmed the rulers and authorities and he puts them to open shame. This is in Colossians 2, 13 to 15. So the meta-narrative of all things is this. God is defeating Satan, sin, and death, making a people for himself, for his glory, and for our good. That's what he's doing. You see, the verses that I took you to, it says, God is seeing and revealing all of these things, but the really big story is that God is defeating the three big enemies. He's defeating Satan, sin, and death. Right? And he's doing it so that he can make a people for himself, first for his glory, and also for our good. So I'm going to paint this picture next week, expounding just this idea, nothing more. This week, you've been very patient. It's all about understanding that what a meta-narrative is, why there is a meta-narrative, showing that there's a meta-narrative in every story, showing that there's a meta-narrative of all things, and that meta-narrative has come straight from the Word of God. It is God is defeating Satan, sin, and death, making a people for himself, and it's for his glory and for our good. That's the one real meta-narrative, and that's what we're going to do next week.